Oh, the CBC, they've become such failures to give you any good understanding as far as what's actually being reported on. Luckily, like I say, because I'm so scrupulous, meticulous in paying attention to stuff, because I realize that I don't want to be ill-informed or uninformed at this particular time, because doing so can be very detrimental, not just for me, but for large segments of the society as well. So when I saw this, and the headline is like, there was nothing breaking, there was nothing as far in the headline that said that this is something, that this is like a precedent being set by the Supreme Court, but it is. And it actually tells me that those on the Supreme Court in Canada, these are not people that are truly standing in full defense of your individual liberties. These are people that are basically political activists, just like a lot of those on the Supreme Court in the U.S. Because, like I say, to pretend that human beings have no political bias, well, that's to pretend that the sun doesn't shine or fire isn't hot. We're all humans, we're all fallible, and we all have internal biases and prejudice. Now, some people hold themselves to a high standard, but think about the kind of people that hold themselves to a high standard. It's people that are constantly challenged or opposed or have their positions always in perilous danger of being taken away from them. Those are people that will hold themselves to a higher standard. But people on the Supreme Court, basically appointed for life, where's the incentive for these people to hold themselves to a standard, a high standard? Basically, they've secured themselves a job for life. And especially if their findings or their judgments fall in line with the political orthodoxy of the day, there's nothing to threaten their livelihoods or their jobs or their occupations. So they'll do it based on their own internal biases and political prejudice. So even when you get a good story, which is, I guess, somewhat represented here, it's not fully realized, because these people at their core are authoritarian in nature and still believe firmly on that authoritarian structure of law and order and justice. These are not reasonable people. Headline out of CBC News, politics. Gee, I wonder why it's under the politics section. You already know. Supreme Court stresses jail should be the exception for people awaiting trial. BC man challenged a decision to keep him in custody pending trial. It's being reported by the Canadian Press, March 28, 2019. So, I mean, the headline, it sounds good, right? The Supreme Court stresses jail should be the exception for people awaiting trial. I would actually agree with that. This is the part, like I say, you always got to get down the article to get the nuance to what they're actually trying to say. The headline, that's meaningless until you actually learn and read between the lines of what they're really trying to put forth. The Supreme Court of Canada says making an accused person wait in jail before trial should be the exception, not the rule, in a decision that affirms a key legal safeguard intended to ensure speedy justice. And you know, the only reason why they came to that decision is because of historical past judgments in the decisions, that they don't want to get too far away from those past judgments, which was predominantly built on English common law, which is, yeah, you're presumed innocent, and no, you should never be incarcerated or punished or penalized or jailed until you've been proven actually guilty. So the only reason why they're even given this kind of judgment is because, well, I guess they feel that they got to be compelled to align with historical precedent. But as I read on, you'll see that they're still trying to move that goalpost. In a 9-0 decision today, the High Court says people accused of crimes are automatically entitled to periodic reviews of their detention under provisions set out in the criminal code. Ah, see, that's where the rewording has changed. No, historically it was until you've been proven and found guilty in a court of law, literally convicted, you're innocent. You're innocent until proven guilty. So to be jailed before you've been proven guilty is illegitimate, immoral, and illegal under common or natural law. And the only reasonable exception that has ever been laid out that I would even remotely agree to is those who are a direct and imminent threat. So, you know, let's say someone that just killed a whole lot of people, right? A serial killer. Well, obviously you don't want to give that serial killer bail because they probably are not going to be remorseful, and there's a very good chance that they're probably going to commit another crime. That is the exception to the rule where, yes, these people should be held in confinement or restrict their access to the public in some way until we can get to the bottom of that. But even then, that bar was set really, really high. Now, like I say, that bar is getting lower and lower, and the goalpost is shifting further and further away from actual justice to more about authoritarian approaches and intimidation and oppression. So it's not about periodical reviews, but look, they expand on this. In clarifying how the provision should work, the court says Parliament intended to ensure that people awaiting trial have their cases reviewed by a judge at set points in time to consider whether keeping them in jail is justified. It means jailers must apply to a judge for a hearing on behalf of the accused at a 30-day mark in case involving lesser offenses and at the 90-day mark in case involving indictable offenses. The case landed at the High Court as a result of an appeal by Corey Lee James Meyer, who was arrested on several firearms charges in British Columbia 3 years ago. Though Myers eventually pleaded guilty to reduced charges, he also challenged the decision to keep him in custody pending trial. So that's the only reason. One human being, one Canadian that was wrongfully convicted, and you know how that probably played out, but he was so determined that he was going to stand and fight for his freedoms, and he obviously had some money at his disposal, but he did so, and the Supreme Court had to at least align with the reality that he stood for, because, like I say, historical precedent gave him that. But look at how they, like I say, they shifted that goalpost to the point where now they're saying that if you're on like some lesser charge of like nothingness, where maybe there's not even a criminal act involved, a genuine crime involved, because we understand legislation is written today that causes a lot of people to be criminally charged for things that doesn't actually involve harm or injury to another person. So they're basically saying even 30 days, if you haven't caused harm to anybody and you're being charged under some arbitrary law that some central planner or authoritarian created or conjured up in the legislature, of course you should be immediately released. And even if you're convicted, the potential of jail time, even then, if it's a lower charge, what they're suggesting, you may never even go to jail, even if you were convicted of a particular criminal offense at some point in time. So the fact that you're going to spend time in jail even before that fact is already saying that, like I say, they've moved the goalpost to the point where now you're guilty until you can finally figure out a way to prove yourself innocent. You better hire yourself one of them high-paid fucking lawyers, I guess. Because the ones that the government might afford or front you, and that's actually, even that is being greatly reduced to the point where nobody even gets a free lawyer anymore because there's just no resources. We're all just the government's too poor, even though look at the fucking millions and billions they squander and spend on all these other bullshit things, right? So anyways, I'll post a link to this article in the description of the video below, but this isn't actually even a good story. I mean, it's kind of a little bit good for this gentleman maybe, because he probably had at least some aspect of this that vindicated him in some way. But for the rest of us, this is actually bad precedent, and it's coming down. It's being handed down by the Supreme Court. So once again, folks, authoritarianism has now made another great leap forward, even in a case that seemingly should be a reflection of going the other way. That's the thing with politics, and that's why this is put under the politics section, is because they're trying to manipulate your mind into thinking that up is down, left is right, and 2 + 2 = 5. It's Canadian Libertarian, and I love liberty.